Welcome to Chapter 3, in which we are looking at all the steps to follow for the integration between Adquio devices and Casambi networks. This time, we are going to see how to configure the Lithernet controller. To do this, the first thing we have to do is to connect it to the laptop. You will remember that in the previous video we stayed with this configuration. So now we take a network cable and we connect one end to the PoE injector and the other end to our laptop. Okay, we've got it. Now, all we have to do is log into our laptop and access the Lithernet. Let's get on with it. So we've already logged into the computer, and the first thing we're going to do is look in the Lithernet Gateway documentation to see what its default IP is, the IP that it comes with from the factory. I have already looked it up, and this IP is 192.168.1.90. What we are going to do now is to put this laptop with its Ethernet network card in the same range as the Lithernet Gateway. To do this, what we have to do is to put an IP that has the first 3 digits the same as the Lithernet Gateway and the 4th digit different. For example, in this case, we are going to give it the IP address 192.168.1.11, all except the 90, which is the one that the Lithernet Gateway has, and which, if we give it, will logically come into conflict. For this, we are going to go to the Control panel. We are going to go to the Network Configuration, Change Adapter Configuration. In this case, you can see that we have an Ethernet device here. Right-click, Properties, go to TCP IPv4. Properties. By default, in this case, it's set to DHCP. We're going to set it to the IP that we said, 192.168.1.11. It already proposes the subnet mask, and we don't need to configure anything else. Confirm, close, 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 and close. We then open a browser and go to the IP 192.168.190. Press Enter. As you can see, the first screen of our Lithernet Gateway has already opened, where we are invited to set a user and a default password. I am going to put admin only for this training. Continue. And now we have to log in with the user that we have just created. Very well. Let's close all this up. All right. So then the next steps are to go to System and go to Wizard. The next thing we need to select is the protocol that our Adquio is going to connect to. This device should select the BACnet IP option. Okay? Next step. This screen is very important. Let's see it in detail. The local device ID is going to be what will differentiate different Lithernet if we have several in the installation. So if this is 1, we can leave it as it is. But if it's 2, here we should put a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 25, and so on. We're going to leave the UDP port as the default. We're going to leave all of this at the default. And now we come to the points that we need to pay special attention to. The first one, Use Broadcast, tells us if we are going to use the broadcast functionality in our Casambi network. This functionality allows us, by sending a single message to the network, all the luminaires in the network to respond. If we are going to use this, we should activate it, and if not, it can be left as it is deactivated. This broadcast functionality will allow us to turn on, turn off, dim, change color, etc. all the luminaires in the installation synchronously, but we have no more control over them. We can only work with all of them together. Start device and device count are the number of devices in the Casambi network that we want to integrate in Adquio. First, I'm going to leave you a screenshot of the Casambi application where we can see this number of devices so that you can identify what number your devices start at, as they are not always going to start at 1. If you have been playing with your Casambi network, removing and putting devices, it is very possible that some numbers have been left occupied and your network might start at 5, for example, because the others were removed and the spaces were not reused. On which device do we want to start? 1 might be fine. Device count. If in your network, for example, you have 10 luminaires and you are sure that you have those 10 luminaires, and when I say luminaires, I mean also switches, presence sensors, brightness sensors, etc. devices. How many do we have in that network? If we have 10, we could put a 10 here. But what happens? If we have had to make changes to our network, removing and adding devices, it is possible that those numbers have moved up and we have left gaps in the middle. So, if we have 10 devices, it's a good idea to put, say, a 20 here, so that later, when we're in Adquio, we can identify which of those devices are in use and which of those devices are empty and free. Okay, one important thing is that we should only put values here if we want to use a per-device control on a per-device basis. In most cases, Casambi networks are controlled by scenes or by groups. Therefore, here we could put 0, and this can serve us perfectly well, because if we are going to control the Casambi network only by scenes, and we do not need to go to each device one by one, we cannot export the devices. If, on the other hand, we want to do, for example, an incident control of the luminaires of the network, where we have to check the status of each of the luminaires, then here we should put what we said before. For example, a 20 if we have 10 luminaires, or a 255 if we want to recover all of them and we have a large installation. Groups and scenes, exactly the same as before. If in our installation we want to work with groups, here we can tell you that our groups start at 1 and that we have 10, and that we have 10 scenes as well, and that they start at 1. Okay, same as before. If we've had to delete scenes, create new scenes, delete them again, create them again, the scene numbers may be higher than what you actually have left. Finally, we may have 10 scenes, but if we've had to make adjustments, maybe the last scene is not 10, but 15, for example. So, if we decide not to work, for example, with groups, we can put 0 here. And if we decide not to work with scenes, we can also put 0 here. In our case, we are going to work with groups, for example, and we are going to put that we have 10 groups, and we are not going to work with scenes. Okay? As this is a training, and as in the following steps, we are going to see how to discriminate information, we are going to put a bit of everything, so that we can see how in the software that allows us to send this information to Adquio, we can have a next layer where we decide how to do all this. So, we will have 20 luminaires, 10 groups, and 10 scenes. With this, we would already have this part configured. We are going to hit the reboot button, and now we just have to wait for our Lithernet Gateway to apply the configuration and give us control again. It will take a little while. And once it reboots, this Lithernet is already exporting this information via BACnet. Before we leave here, let's pay attention to the Casambi settings option, because here we have a drop-down where we need to make a very important change. We must set it to, or the latest version you have, as this affects the refresh rate of what happens on the Casambi network with respect to Adquio. If we leave it on active, if someone, for example, changes a scene from another device, Adquio can take up to a minute to find out because the Lithernet does not send it that information. On the other hand, if we leave it on passive 39.52, our controller will find out almost instantly. That is why we must change this option. Save and click on the Refresh Casambi info button. Very important. What should we do now? Now we need to configure the network, because the IP address that our Lithernet Gateway has is not suitable for us in this case. Okay, so what IP address should we set it to? Well, we should set it to an IP address that allows us to read it from the Adquio controller, depending on which Adquio controller we are using. If, for example, it is a Pro or a Lite, we could set it to 172.20.20x, because those are the IP addresses of its LAN ports. That would be the most correct and safest thing to do, that these Lithernet gateways would be on the LAN side of an Adquio Lite or an Adquio Pro controller. If, on the other hand, we work with an Adquio Mini controller, we can do the same, because all Adquio Mini controllers, in addition to the IP they take from the network via DHCP, also have a static IP that is also in the same range, so that it works in a similar way to its Adquio Pro and Lite brothers. What happens? In the case of the Adquio Mini, as it has a single network port, it does not have a firewall. Therefore, we could do what we mentioned. Give it an IP address in the 172.20.20x range, whichever one the Adquio Lite does not have. Simply then, here we should put that IP address. The gateway through which this Lithernet Gateway can go out to the internet may need it if we want it to be able to update, and the DNS exactly the same. We should set a valid DNS. In this case, am going to use Google's and others that are also secure. So, we are going to put a 172.20.20.2 and the gateway 172.20.20.1. This configuration would work for any Adquio Mini, as well as for any Adquio Lite or Pro. With these IP addresses, all of them will be able to read this Lithernet Gateway. And we were forgetting one very important thing. We have the DHCP option enabled. This tells it to take its IP via DHCP if there is DHCP on the network. So we have to be very careful with this, because if we leave it like this, and there is no DHCP on the network, it's going to work. It will take the IP that we have indicated, but if there is DHCP in the network, it will not take this configuration, and it will take the one that comes from DHCP. In the case of an Adquio Pro or Lite, in the LAN ports, in those 3 LAN ports that it has integrated, there is DHCP, so it would give you an IP, and it wouldn't have to be this one, so we're going to disable it. Very important. Then we click Save and Reboot. It is important that we remember this IP address, 172.20.20.2, because from now on it will be the one we will need to use to connect to this Lithernet Gateway. Reboot. This is going to be the last window we will see of this Lithernet Gateway at this moment, because we are no longer in the range we have just set. Therefore, we are no longer going to be able to access it. With this, we end this 3rd chapter in which we configure our Lithernet Gateway. In the next chapter, we will see how to take advantage of this configuration to start extracting information from this Lithernet Gateway and filter this information to pass it to Adquio. See you in Chapter 4.